in terms of this particular session, we've heard a lot over the last day and a bit in terms of rich discussions on the challenges and the opportunities that universities, TTOs, broader KU teams need to possibly get ahead of, become more aware of. Talked about devolved approaches to funding, changes to supplementary funding, the spin-out review, a new spin-out register, geopolitical issues, domestic political issues in particular, cost pressures. There's lots of different challenges that have come up time and again in the sessions at Praxis over this year's conference. But there's also something else, and that something else is this thing called artificial intelligence, and the many different types of artificial intelligence, and the varying definitions, and the challenges and opportunities within this space as well. So a flavor of what you're going to get from this panel is AI integration opportunities, its potential. You're going to hear about what is and isn't patentable in terms of AI creations. You're going to hear about filing trends as well, which fortunately we have an expert in that space as well, and also concrete examples of how to leverage AI. Opportunities, irrespective of your degree of knowledge on this topic, there will be practical examples as well from colleagues here too. I think we were kind of somewhat overwhelmed with the quality and volume of abstracts, so I just want to say thank you again to our colleagues for kind of putting this together and being so mature to agree to share the stage. We really appreciate it. In terms of the format, we will have a series of presentations, and then we'll have a panel with the opportunity for some questions. So, do listen in, prepare your questions, because there'll be an opportunity at the end to pose them. Who are our presenters? Sahand, Zanjani-Pour. Oxentia is a senior consultant, digital and AI strategy lead. Sahand holds a PhD in computational physics. Recently has been delivering on a very interesting Innovate grant opportunity that's been funded. Sahand has recently been sharing insights on leveraging AI for effective tech transfer in other forums similar to this, so very well positioned to kind of support today. We have Paul Roscoe, Senior Associate and Patent Attorney at Appleyard Leeds. Paul has worked at Airbus as an engineer, as an inventor, and as a patent engineer. More recently, he's worked in private practice and specializes in computer-implemented inventions with a focus on AI. So it's probably good you're here as well, yes? And last but not least, we're really pleased to have Sian Rodway, Chief Operating Officer at MdrX LLP, part of Mishcon Group. Sian leads and shapes emerging technology consulting services. Throughout her career, she has harnessed AI to solve business problems and enhance value. And recently, her work has been recognized by the UK National Security Advisor, as well as Women in Tech Excellence as well. So thank you, Sian. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sahand, so much. We will kick off with Sian, who's kindly going to provide a primer and deliver your presentation first. So thank you.
Thank you, John, for that introduction, and thank you all for having us today. So as John said, I'm Sian. I'm COO of MdrX. We're a technology consultancy, and we specialise in building bespoke emerging tech and helping organisations understand how they can use emerging technologies in their businesses. I hear you say, I've heard that all before from consultancies. The difference with MdrX is really excitingly, we're backed and we've grown out of Mishcon Dorea. Some of my colleagues here from Mishcon you might have met over the last couple of days. And what that allows us to do is when we're delivering technology projects, when we're delivering technology strategy, whether it is the technology that brings in legal questions or the project itself or the organisation has legal complexities, we have 1,500 lawyers where we can draw on their expertise into our projects so So when we are building that technology or strategy for you, you can rest assured that it's compliant by design. So I really think that it's the sort of future of professional services to see business, technology and legal services combined, and we're trying to pave the way for that. So I said I would start off with a bit of a primer around artificial intelligence and where it is at the moment. I know that we will have a lot of different levels of experience in the room. Some of you might be really familiar with artificial intelligence. If so, forgive me for the next 5 minutes. But just to make sure we're all on the same page. I know that there might be some people here who are worried about AI and the risk that it poses to society. To put your minds at rest, to start with that, I asked ChatGPT to write me a joke that TTOs, an audience of TTOs would find funny and would get them excited for my speech. So, how many TTOs does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but first secure the patent, negotiate the licensing agreement and ensure compliance. That was actually that wasn't in the speech that you actually laughed. That was supposed to prove that we didn't need to worry about AI and there was still some work to do. Gosh, that's thrown me that you laughed at that, but I've definitely got the audience wrong. So AI does not do everything yet, okay? We're often in the news and thinking about these sort of frontier AI systems, which are all things to all people. At the moment in the market, we have much narrower applications of AI. But having said that, they are getting more and more powerful all of the time. So some of the developments to be aware of in 2024, generative AI and multimodal AI is at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I'm specific in calling it by its name because often we do talk about AI as one thing. And in fact, there are lots of different types of artificial intelligence and some that are particularly relevant to your roles and others like computer vision, the ability to drive autonomous vehicles that, although they might help you get to work in the future, they're not necessarily going to impact your roles in the next 5 years. So let's talk about generative AI and multimodal AI. Some of the most exciting developments, I think, in this space in 2024 is that not only is AI like ChatGPT or Google's Bard, Gemini, now able to speak to us in text and language as if it was human, but it's now able to accept different types of inputs and generate different types of outputs, whether that is movies or pictures or CSV files. It's really meaning that we've got far more capability within those tools that we can use within our role to generate content. As a result of that, I think that we're seeing a trend where AI is being used to create new things and actually generate revenue for businesses. Now, our role working with a lot over the last few years has been around driving efficiency within organisations, using it to increase productivity, which I know some of my colleagues are going to talk to you more about. As well as sort of increasing that efficiency in the back end functions, we're now seeing AI much more on the front line. And I think an industry where this is really obvious is entertainment and media, the use of AI in movie making and some of the risks that come with that capability too. We're about to see a really big experiment in AI. We've got a number of elections this year. AI has the opportunity to generate a lot of information and perhaps misinformation. So it's going to be very interesting to see what risks it poses to the democratic process. Another big trend in 2024 that I'm keeping an eye on. And as a result of that, and as a result of all of our growing awareness of artificial intelligence, we are seeing a greater focus on the risks, which is a good thing. Okay, so making sure that we have a good risk mitigation, whether it's at an organisational level or regulatory framework at a government level, I think that that's something that we can expect to see explored. maybe not over the next 6 weeks, but after July 4th, I expect it to be back on the top of the political agenda. We've seen the EU AI Act go through in the last few weeks, and actually those of you watching the news on autonomous vehicles will have seen that there's been legislation passed recently to enable AV in the near future as well. So while we're sort of grappling with those risks and the regulation over the next few months and for the rest of 2024, we will also continue to see rapid development. Okay, so I think that's really the nature and the context, which fits very well into a conference based on change and regeneration. I think that we will see AI continue to regenerate, continue to change the worlds of work that we operate in. So hopefully that acts as a bit of a primer for what AI is. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the opportunity for TTOs today, and how you can practically go back to your jobs and think about how you might want to incorporate AI into your workflows. So the actionable next steps that you can take when it comes to AI, I'm going to talk about it in two ways. First of all, preparing your data. I've been talking to a lot of you over the last couple of days, and no one has told me that they think that their data is great. Okay, so we have got a lot of bad data across TTOs, which is going to make utilising this sort of technology really difficult in the future. And by bad data, I mean data that is incomplete or stored in silos or duplicative, or in some cases inaccurate. And if we want to make use of AI, our own models in the future, then we need the data that we use to train artificial intelligence to be accessible and available. So that's the first thing that I would recommend you go away and think about, is how are you managing your data? What does your data estate look like? And the second thing I would say that you should go away and think about is how you are thinking about risk. Obviously, there are risks associated with using artificial intelligence, generative AI specifically in your roles. So first of all, misinformation. We hear a lot about the challenge of artificial intelligence being that it can hallucinate information, and that's a real fault of AI. I would actually argue that at the moment that is a fault of the person in the chair as opposed to the computer, because we are missing the point that the content created is not being created to be factual. It is created in order to be the most likely response to the question we are asking. That's oversimplifying. I always worry when I say that when I've got data scientists in the room, but I think it's a way to get your head around it. So don't set your expectation that the response you're going to get is going to be factual, and then I think you will use the outputs far more effectively. Also exposing sensitive information. So in order to mitigate this, think about what your usage guidance is. Think about how you're controlling access and auditing. I'm going to talk about access in a bit more in just a moment. And finally, a risk around bias. So we know that a lot of these large language models have bias in them. They are trained on biased data, where organisation such as Google has tried to overcorrect this. We've also really criticised them because then the outputs don't seem accurate at all because we're used to information being biased, okay? So we do need to be aware of bias in data and think about when we're training our own models, what is the diversity within that training data, and what are the ethical guidelines that we want to have around the use of AI in businesses. And we can help you, MdrX can help you come up with that risk-based approach, which can be very light touch if you're a small organisation. And we also do that at a much broader level with bigger organisations who want to use AI at scale too. So I spoke to a number of people this weekend, God, it's felt like a weekend, this week around their use of AI at the moment. And I got a couple of answers. A few people said no, they weren't using it. They weren't sure how to use it at the moment. A number of people said yes. And I said, well, you know, what risk mitigation frameworks do you have in place? What's the guidance that you've got for using artificial intelligence? And they told me, oh, I've been told not to use it, but I am using it. Okay, so if you are a manager and you've told your team not to use AI, I can assure you, according to 100% of the anonymous participants I've interviewed in the last couple of days, they are already using artificial intelligence. We are burying our heads in the sand if we think that our teams are not using free versions of this software in order to augment their skills at work. So instead of saying no, I really encourage you to think about, for the tools that are out there, for the software that's out there, how easy is it for you to license and enable people to start getting to know and understand what the AI can do to support their roles in a safe environment. Okay, so I think that that's a really important takeaway in terms of your next steps with regards to AI. So how might you use it? And I came with some ideas about how you used it, how we're currently working with organisations to help them use AI. But I actually have chosen to pick 3 examples to share with you that I've had real life conversations with people here over the last couple of days in terms of how they think they might use AI based on our conversations. So the first one, we were talking in the session yesterday around the amount that is spent on copywriting. So in pre-revenue businesses, getting copywriters in to write a website in order to test the market, okay? That investment could go a lot further if you were generating the content using a large language model like GPT-4. Okay, and the reason I say that is because you'll be able to generate far more with the same amount of effort than employing one copywriter. And that is not to say don't use copywriters, but what about using them on the businesses where you have already proved the market value and investing in them with the higher skilled expertise and drafting the first version of the website much more quickly using a tool like GPT-4. So that was use case 1. The second one was talking about financial projections and analysis. Now, I've done many of these in my years as a consultant, as I'm sure many of you who work in TTOs have too, looking at what the worst and best case financial projections might be for an organisation, and then something in the middle, which is probably the most realistic. What we're able to do, and MdrX has worked with large businesses, large infrastructure investment businesses to do, is you can do far more options and alter far more variables in your planning and your analysis very quickly. So no longer do you only have time to do 3 options that you can base your assessment on and your decisions on, but you could look at 5, 10, and you could look at different variables that could impact the future financial performance and revenues of an organisation. And the final use case, I talked to a number of people, and it came up yesterday in the discussion about social impact. Using tools to do social impact analysis, again, can really help you cut down time. And I know stood here talking about efficiencies, running a consultancy, a few of you might be thinking, oh, that means cutting jobs, right? So you're just trying to find efficiencies. That's not the case here. Being able to do more with the resources you have is equally as beneficial. We've talked a lot, John talked about some of the issues we've covered over the last couple of days. Resourcing is really difficult at the moment, finding the right talent. Many people have teams who they've talked about being overstretched, having to cover more faculties and more departments. Giving them tools which allows them to do this sort of analysis more efficiently can really help with the productivity of your team, but also the wellness of your team, allowing them to deliver what is needed over a broader portfolio without waiting for more resource to be found. So 3 use cases. If you want to talk more about them, please come and find me afterwards. So finally, and I know I need to hand over the mic shortly, but I want to talk about the roadmap and the steps to adoption. So when we're working with businesses to adopt AI, the first thing we look at is what are their goals? What are the parts of the organization that can benefit most from adopting artificial intelligence? So that's always the fun bit. And then we look at the data landscape. And as I said, and it is not unique to TTOs, so many businesses do not store their data in an effective way to make use of advanced analytics or artificial intelligence. So we'll spend some time looking at quality and governance and investing in the integrity and interoperability of data. It's only at that point that you can implement your analytics and artificial intelligence, at which point you'll also need to make sure that you've fostered that culture among your team of being data-driven and really making use of the tools available. You'll continue to scale and flex your models, so it's not a deliver once solution. Artificial intelligence is going to continue to regenerate, adapt, change over the next few years. So I think that it's something that we will continue to need to work on in order to optimize and add value to your organizations. If that's felt a bit overwhelming, just 3 quick things to take away. So you can start small. I've talked a bit in that roadmap about building your own models and analytics. There are ways that you can use models that are available to you, but do it safely, okay? So find a bit of your organization that could benefit, find a use case, and then try something out. Then start to focus on data quality and just have a reflect on whether or not your data is being stored in an optimal way so that you can use it in the future. And finally, if you need to, get expert advice. We've seen a lot of organisations who work with partners for patent advice, copyright advice throughout this process. Adopting this technology can be similar. So please let us know if we can help you. There are lots of organisations out there who can give you support to adopt this in the right way. So the opportunity today for TTOs is real. I'm really excited about it, and so should you. I think this really creates a moment in time where we can increase productivity and get more out of our teams without overstretching them or burning them out. If you want to chat anymore, we've got a Q&A in a moment, and I'd be happy to chat afterwards. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry for the bad joke at the start.
Thank you so much, Sean. Paul, you're up next.
Yep. So, hey, I'm Paul. I work for Appleyard Lees. We are a firm of patent and trademark attorneys and solicitors. We specialise in intellectual property. We have 4 offices in Manchester, Halifax, Leeds, and now Cambridge, which is 7 years. Yes, 7 years in the running. We have 70 fee earners, covering all types of services in IP. So we don't handle commercial law, property, wills, things like that. We specialise in IP. And I wanted to talk about how actually to protect AI inventions. So one of the main things I get asked is, what can we patent? There's a common misconception that software is not patentable. AI, when it boils down to it, is just algorithms. You can't patent algorithms. You can't protect mathematical models. That is true in a very strict sense, but more broadly, when it's applied to something, then it's generally okay, depending on what it's applied to. So I wanted to just quickly go over the law. It's not heavy on law, so don't worry. I appreciate this is straight after lunch. There's 3 hurdles to patentability. One of them everybody could understand, which is novelty. Is it literally different to what's been done before? A second hurdle is it inventive? Does it have an inventive step? So that's one things we look for are things like, does it have an advantage? Does it solve a problem? Where I'm going to focus is actually on whether or not the invention is subject matter eligible. The test for that is different depending on which territory you're going to file the application in. It used to be the case that the UK was very strict, Europe was a bit better, and the US was even better. That's changed recently, the subtleties, but the UK is actually more favourable than Europe now. But I'm going to focus on some examples. Now, these are real-life examples for cases that I've actually worked on. I've actually drafted some patent applications for these myself. So I'm going to try something and ask people to raise their hands if they think something is patentable, and then subsequently raise their hands if they think it isn't patentable. And they're not all patentable, if that makes sense. So I just want to see how much traction I get with this. So the first one, I do quite a lot of work with autonomous vehicles. What I've deliberately done with these examples, I've made the prior art, so what we say is the bit that it's known, I've made that so far removed from what the invention is that we're not concerned with novelty or inventive step. We're literally focused on what is subject matter eligible. So the prior art here is a human driving a car. The invention is a neural network. It could be end-to-end. It could be a number of neural networks stacked together. They've been trained on sensor data to output control signals for gears and brakes, throttle positions, things like that. The advantage, therefore, is you can remove the burden from the human and eventually completely remove them from the driving loop entirely. So what do people think about this one? Do you think it's subject matter eligible or not? It does involve an algorithm. So what do people think? Is it eligible? Yes. Okay, and then who doesn't? Okay, we do have a couple of hands. This one is, and I think it'd be pretty much patentable anywhere in the world. The key things to look for with this is where it actually controls something in the real world. There's a real world effect. So anything that falls into that category, it's positive for patentability. So, sub-question to this is some additional types of claims we can get granted would be things like actually a independent method of training the model. So that would be, the input data would be sensor data, the output data would be paired data, which would be like throttle positions or gear selections, things like that. You can also get patents granted for generating training data. So if you want to generate enough training data to actually drive a car, you're going to have to be out on the road for billions of hours. So to cut that time down, you want to create some data. You might want to do it synthetically with like generative adversarial models. And they're the types of things that we'd probably add in to the patent as well to get independent protection for those, because that could be really valuable, because some tech companies, it's not necessarily the models themselves, and sometimes it's the training data which is really valuable. This is one of the first ones I actually drafted AI. I drafted this in 2016. It is a method of diagnosing a fault in a piece of hardware. The hardware is a railway point switch. So the way they work before is railway point switch draws current when it operates. Then you monitor whether the average current goes above the threshold, send a fault signal to an operator, they'll go and investigate what the fault is. It's quite a dumb system. Using a random forest, that's ensemble learning, you can classify the type of fault to narrow it down more specifically to relieve the burden from the operator. So there's no actual control of the point switch. So who thinks that one is patentable? Got a few hands up. And who thinks it's not? Yeah, so sorry to disappoint, but this was patentable. The key thing, so this whole thing of a real world effect, it uses sensor data. So it doesn't actually have to control things or output something in the real world. It uses sensor data and diagnoses a fault in a real piece of equipment. So that's why this was actually patentable. Next one, document retrieval. So this would be, we all know word processing. You want to find a document quite quickly, or you want to find text within a document. You can use a language model to search for relevant documents, and it gives you the ability to identify them more quickly. Who thinks that would be patentable? Few hands, and then not patentable. So yes, so I think this one, the real answer to this would be depends on where you file. I mentioned before that the Europe is quite strict, like the UK. You're not going to get something granted for this in Europe. You possibly could in the US. I used to do quite a lot of work drafting for natural language processing inventions for Babylon Health, which is a London company. We only filed there because of this, how difficult it was in Europe. And the last one I've got is automated method of diagnosis. So the prior art, the doctor looks at the medical image and determines if a disease is present. We can train a convolutional neural network or similar to diagnose that automatically, categorize the level of disease, triage patients more quickly. Who thinks that would be patentable? Most people, I think. Who thinks no? There's still some. This, I think, probably would be patentable. There's a subtlety here in the sense of you've got to be careful of if you don't fall into another excluded subject matter category, which would be methods of diagnosis. There are ways around that. For example, you wouldn't say taking pictures of the patient because the patient has to be present. You would say receiving pictures of patients, and that would then there's no presence of the human. It's completely in vitro. But ignoring that, this would be patentable. And the analogy I use is a camera is effectively a sensor. So you are effectively using sensor data. And anything related to images. So computer vision is one of the largest sections of AI that's patentable. A lot of filings in computer vision. So during the pandemic, I looked at how many patents were being filed under the category, what the Patent Office would call AI inventions. So when you file a patent application, they give it a code, and each code denotes the type of technology that it is. So this is all patents that have families that have been published in a particular year. When I looked at it in about 2020, it was just completely exponential. It looked like it was just going through the roof and it was going to continue forever. I've looked at it now, and it looks like it's starting to plateau off. I don't know whether that's just because of the nature, it's never going to go up forever. It's probably going to be more like an S curve, and whether that's the start of the plateau or whether the pandemic, the number of filings, because we saw, a slowdown in work during the pandemic, whether that's had anything to do with it. So time will only tell. But I think the things we can take from this is the fact that filing numbers are still going up, and there's more and more prior art out there. When I started filing these things in 2015, 2016, you could get patents granted for listing the algorithm, and that was novel. Now you've got to go down into how it's trained. You've got to put a lot more information in there to navigate around the prior art. So my advice really is file sooner rather than later, because every year goes by, there's more and more information out there that can be used against you. Yeah, and include more details as well. The patent offices are becoming more strict. They want to see how your model's trained, what training data you're using. It doesn't have to be include the training data per se, because we've got a limit on how much you would ever include in there. You're not going to include billions of drawings, for example. But we need to describe the type of information we're going to include. And the last thing I wanted to talk about really was the generative AI tools. Someone said to me when I was becoming a patent attorney, well, that's a bit foolish because you're going to be out the job one day. AI is going to take your job. That was probably in 2010. And I laughed. And then when I saw ChatGPT, I panicked. So I tried to sample this, and I thought to myself, well, I'll see whether it can do a simple invention. So I think I did the prior art to bicycle. Can you draft me a claim for a tricycle? And it messed it up. So I said, okay, well, you messed it up for these reasons. Have another go. And I had another go and just had a wild stab somewhere else and got it wrong again. There are some specific patent drafting tools, patent prosecution tools. We've looked at them. There's two things that we probably would tell you about them is be careful if you're going to use these, which you want one that's going to sit on your server. It's not linked through APIs to GPT, because you can't put confidential information into those. Just don't do it. If you do find some that can sit on your server, and we have found a few, most of the range between how useful they are, some of them are completely rubbish. Some of them seem to be like they may be useful for very, very specific tasks, but those are so few and far between, and the results are so variable that it's about as good as somebody who's been doing the job about 6 months. But that person who's been doing the job is still going to get better, so that we'd never give that work to a model. It's not really going to cut out any work for us. They can't draft claims. Most of them will work if you put your claims in, but that's where all the work is. So they might be able to draft some parts of a description. So yeah, these things may get better. Maybe I will be out the job one day, but I think I'm safe for now. I think that's the message. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions on this, those examples I gave, the UK Patent Office have actually become very, very good at restructuring their guidance. I did a podcast on one, and we should be doing another one soon because it's changed. There's 18 examples. If you search for the AI guidance, it's on the .gov website. There's 18 examples of things that are and aren't patentable. They're written quite well. It's not in complete patent attorney lingo, so it's not just all claims. There are claim examples on there, which you can ignore, but there are some things that are really well written in layman's terms. The European Patent Office does the same thing as well. So if you want some kind of indications about what you've got, whether it's going to fly or not, then the first thing I would look for is going there. If anyone's got any questions on it as well, then feel free to send me an email. We have quite a lot of information we publish in this area as well. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions on that.
Oh, hello. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Paul. Right, I am Sahand, and I'm going to talk to you about a bit of a practitioner side of AI and how we can use it in our roles. So it's been quite a nice trend and how we came to this. And yeah, my talk is just basically in our roles, how are we going to use AI? So a bit about Oxentia. I'm a senior consultant at Oxentia. We go back to, our heritage goes back to University of Oxford. We were part of University of Oxford and providing tech transfer and knowledge exchange advice and services. We became ISIS Enterprise to provide the same services to other universities than Oxford. And then we expanded our international services as well in 2009. And as ISIS Enterprise, we rebranded to Oxentia and span out in 2017. Paul already, sorry, John already introduced me, so I'm not going to introduce myself again. So what I am going to talk about is the AI tools in KC, knowledge exchange commercialization, and knowledge transfer offices. I sometimes use knowledge transfer instead of technology transfer to include shape as well. And building AI capabilities in KC organizations. So that's what I'm going to talk about. What I'm not going to talk about, I'm not going to focus, is why generative AI is great, what's the value of it, it's because it's generative, what's the ethics and what's the risk of using AI. It's completely different than what I'm going to talk about. And also AI tools for collaboration and partnerships, which are great, but I'm not going to focus on that either. We can talk about that later. Right, so I don't know how many people know about the theme of the conference, but the theme of the conference is change, the impact of KE in a changing world, which is great. We all love change. We're facing a lot of change. But I'm going to take it back and then say, what's the evolving world's effect on KE as well? So that's when AI comes into play as well. Already we talked about the dichotomy of AI, with us losing our jobs 2 times actually, both previous speakers. I can assure that no one's going to lose a job to AI for the reason of AI in the next 5 years, and none of us KCs, KC managers or KC professionals. And it's just because of the state of the art AI that it is at the moment, and it hallucinates, it just gives false information, and without the expert knowledge, you won't be able to do anything about it. But it comes back to that, is it a useful tool? Is the useful tool to have AI with all the risk and with all the ethics and biases in the AI, is it actually a useful tool? So let's have I like evidence. So here is not our study, it's a Harvard Business School study. They looked at 758 consultants at Boston Consultancy Groups, and they gave them a trivial task of any consultants that would do it. This is the closest task that I found in the literature to KC managers, KC professionals. So what they looked at was trying to basically, as an entrepreneurial kind of a look, 18 tasks, trivial tasks that AI can do If they use AI, you can see on the, they perform better. If they have the training, it would be the red one, so the quality is even better. So you would have more efficiency and more quality on both ends. More productivity, more efficiency, and better quality. So yeah, maybe we should use AI. Have that as a snapshot. I'll come back to that later as well. Right, so going back to that, when we work with a lot of knowledge exchange offices, and when we want to come up with a profile of a KE manager, we say that they are very smart, they are well networked, and they're incredibly busy. They are always busy. Whatever they're emailing, it just rolls back, because we are busy. So what challenges it can solve, this AI at the moment, is making your life a bit easier, making you more efficient, and solves the challenge of resourcing. I know there's a lot of change going on in different organizations as well. So less similar, same target, but similar, less workforce. So that might be a very good time to use AI in different organizations. The targets don't change, the workforce just decrease. Anyway, so there are many case software and but there are challenging sometimes to integrate. I know that there are good software out there, but the hardest part for me when I look at them is that there are so many different organizations and they have their own way of doing KE, and also it's really hard also to integrate them with, I don't know, Salesforce, but any other software that you use to integrate them as well. So that's another one. And we all like a tailored use. We all do. So now that we know that it can help, how can we efficiently and securely use AI in our roles? A classic tech transfer process. So we all know that every process. One way is to focus on, okay, in the protection, we can use AI to help us protect, or in marketing, copywriting, we can use AI like that. But the way I prefer to look at it is a task-based. So for example, admin and project management, pipeline management, marketing and promotion on known unknowns is, I like that, saying that, because you don't know what you're missing sometimes when it's just you. Anyway, so at first I was gonna give tools for each of these tasks, but I thought it's better if I use only, for example, large language models, GPT. With GPT, you can do all of these basically. So looking at emails, timesheets that you can export from whatever Google or Outlook that you're doing. Translation now with 4.0, GPT 4.0, contracting. These are all stuff that you can start with using GPT. And meetings, in our organization, we do have a lot of meetings. We have to send a lot of minutes of meetings. So what we did was we used an AI tool. After a long surveying and everything, we used an AI tool called Fireflies, which basically slashes our time that we need to spend on writing minutes of meetings. The pipeline manager, awareness raising, I'm not going to go one by one anymore, but these are all the tasks that you can use GPT for. My favorite one, the unknown unknowns, when you're trying to solve a problem, when you normally solve it, you come up with 2 or 3 solutions usually, and then you stop. But what these AI tools do is not just stop there, goes on and on and on. You can ask it to go more and on, like 10, 12 solutions. These are the places that you probably have never looked, but it comes up with those solutions for you as well. It might not always be great, but it gives you those solutions. And also overlook funding opportunities. As we're busy, so we might miss some opportunities that are there. It's great to use a tool that can help us to detect them. Now, okay, right. So yeah, have we solved it? Okay, let's all use AI and then it's going to be great forever. Well, going back to this study, this is all great, but there is a caveat to that. If you use AI for the tasks are not trivial, are not easy for AI to do, the quality drops 19%. that is not acceptable, especially if you're in the quality of 4, that is not acceptable anymore. So what can you do as an organization? What can you do as a practitioner? So we at Oxentia, we came up with our own digital strategy. What I would call it is AI adoption and digital adoption strategy rather. So we focused on guidance, training, and awareness. So what we did was we had a bottom-up approach. We went in and asked what's the most time that you use on tasks. So for example, meetings, minutes of meetings, taking notes, what are the tasks that you use? So that's the bottom-up approach that we use. But I put that AI is just a starting point, just to make sure that no one ever copies and pastes from GPT or ever just trust AI completely. So that's the most important bit that we found out. It has to be in any strategy. Be aware of the security risks and ethics and the bias. Be aware of the bias, and our colleagues talked about as well. Because it's based on the human data, and then humans have been biased so far. The AI is going to be biased as well. It's just a tool. It doesn't have any intention, but because the data is biased, it's going to be biased as well. And then the access control and data protection. It's really hard within organizations to keep your username and password when using an AI just for yourself, but we focus on that as well. We have a confirmed set of tools that we use as well. So if instead of saying that we're not going to use AI and then just not using any AI tools, we find what we need and then we go for the tool that is the most secure and most applicable for us. So that's the confirmed set of tools that we have in the table, obviously. And over relying on AI, yesterday GPT was down. So when I was trying to figure out a summary of a PDF that I wanted to do, I couldn't. So what I had to do was actually read it. So I'm never gonna over-rely on AI ever, I hope. So key takeaways from just the talk that I gave. So we all need, in our organization, guidelines, training, awareness. Never over-rely on AI, but this is good because then there needs to be an expert, which are you, in the role to check that if the outputs are correct or not. Without you, so it's not going to work because the expert is going to say if it's a good output or not. And then the prompting. One thing that we found that in training is the better the prompt, obviously, the better the output. This is just a classic one that we have, kind of a framework. Define your goal, set the context, have your tell your expectation to the GPT or any other model that you're using. Have some sources, so you look here and look there, and then iterate. Ask questions after each time that it gives you an output. And then I want to talk about the shape because it used to be really hard to engage STEM with shape, but now there's no option. They have to come together when it comes to AI, and then they have to work together when it comes to AI. And I find it really exciting because they work together to come up with a solution. Right, I have a conclusion as well. This is for the whole talk, and then I tried to get everything together. We need an expert in the loop. There will be an impact of AI, but it doesn't mean that we're going to lose our job. It's just going to mean that there's another tool for helping. The unknowns as well. It helps you to find those, and make sure that it's an ethical and secure use. And also the future outlook is not as daunting as you might think, but also it is not flowers everywhere either. So it's something in between always. Yeah, and that's the talk. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Okay, we have learned quite a few things there. We've learned that AI and TTAs have similar degrees of humour. We've had some words of reassurance from all three, which we didn't ask them to do, by the way. We weren't trying to put a positive spin on it. This is the genuine opinion of the experts. So at least for the next 5 years, we're safe. but look, that's quite the whole kind of almost cliche kind of ridden discussion on whether robots are going to take your jobs, AI going to take our jobs. I think what's interesting learning from this is that things aren't quite as binary as we believe, and help and hinder in equal measure sometimes some of these tools. I'm particularly interested, in coming from a less research-intensive university, but with a growing kind of a research base and a TTO provision of some kind. Mindful of all these moving parts that form part of the kind of tech transfer kind of process, it looks like the kind of more artful kind of stages of technology transfer, there aren't really AI solutions necessarily immediately out there. The more person-reliant kind of processes and assessments that you need to do in terms of more in-depth due diligence, in terms of positioning it to potential market partners in the market, amongst other things. So I would be interested to know if there's, in the near future, are there any particularly interesting tools that are going to be emerging which could support smaller TTO teams to accelerate the kind of very professional kind of expert level kind of TTO process? Do you see any emerging? And that's for anybody. Yeah.
Personally, yeah, I think that, everything is there. It just needs to be connected, and then whether we like it or not, it's a niche area. KC and TTO's offices, it just needs to everything be together and then talk to each other for it to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really. I mean, obviously, I don't work in knowledge exchange per se. I work in the patent profession. I've heard of some tools that people might be using in order to how to document trade secrets and things like that. So there's one I've heard of that might be coming out where you put in a patent specification, and from there it will list potential trade secrets that you have, and that's meant to be quite good for investors, for bookkeeping and things. So that might be something people might want to keep track of.
I think all I would add to that is actually thinking about the opportunity that's created by the efficiency gains that you could have. So it's really struck me that we've been talking a lot about collaboration, but collaboration always falls down the to-do list because it takes a lot of person-to-person and relationship building, which is actually really valuable for people to do. So if you can use the tools that are already existing to generate some additional time, I think that there is a real possibility to invest in collaboration, which I think would really benefit the sector.
I speak in solidarity of time-poor TTOs across the land, probably on that one. I've been selfish and posed my own question first, but we have hands being raised now, and we have a roving mic. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the talk today. That's really interesting. I've got a question about the algorithm. So one of the examples you gave was a medical application. And there's a lot of, you've got the sensor data, you've got a specific algorithm. What is paintable in that process? Because, the sensors taking data is the same or similar. And the algorithm, how could you actually prove that algorithm is not being used somewhere else for a similar type of application? Because if you're looking at X-rays, for example, and doing diagnosis from those, how could you protect that algorithm, and how would you know if it was being used in another application or not?
So with patents, we work on absolute novelty, so anything that's been published before. So if you can find a disclosure where that has been published for the same purpose, then it lacks novelty. If you can't, then it's novel. So it is true that some patents proceed to grant and they aren't actually valid. We have an oppositions procedure. Patents during litigation are sometimes found invalid. So it's not, the burden of proof is more on the patent examiner to find the relevant prior art. It's our job as attorneys and inventors to argue that it is. So that you do have a duty of disclosure to say what you know. So if you know that it's used else for that same purpose, if you're trying to file a patent application for something you know is not novel, you can't do that. You can't enforce that. But if you genuinely believe it's new, we can file a patent application for that, and then there's an examination procedure in place. That's the same with any technology.
I think I would like to ask if we have something to talk about the copyrights of the contents generated by the AI. So if you have any clear definition of answers to that.
Who wants to take that first?
I've got so there are some cases that in the US would have dealt with this point. I think was it Getty Images. So my understanding of it in a simplistic form is the fact that like generating it is probably not going to infringe on people's copyright. You generating something using the models, but training the models using copyrighted data, that's where you could fall foul of copyright infringement. That's where I see the distinction.
Okay, I think there was another one from, is it Vincent? Yeah.
Hi, yes, Vincent Call from University of Birmingham Enterprise. RTTO, and I'm sure like many other TTOs, they do, we do a high volume of contracting and legal negotiation. And this was briefly touched on in Sahand's talk. I'm just wondering about, in terms of contracting, whether the AI could be used for actual legal negotiation. And the reason I'm sort of thinking about this is just because I know a lot of institutions may struggle with the resource around contracting and legal negotiation. And if it could be implemented, would clients be prepared to effectively negotiate with an AI system, AI program, and is it reliable?
So I'd focus on negotiation. One thing that I really liked and tried with large GPT, I would just call it, is a role play that I have, and I asked it to be because you have to tap into the fine-tuned data. So I asked it to be an investor, and then I tried to basically get more investment, basically higher valuation. And it's good, but it's not something that it's not that great yet. So it's a starting point. Again, with contracting as well, it's a starting point. It's not that good that you can just use it, use the output right away.
Yeah, I'll just build on that and noting that some of my colleagues from Mishcon who are lawyers are in the room, so I'll try not to block my copy book. But I think that in terms of the starting point, to build on that point, things like looking for where the risk areas might be, it's reasonably good at spotting that. Again, I think that this is where you need to be extremely careful about where you're sharing that information and whether or not you're happy for that contract to be shared. If it's something that you have built internally, then you're probably okay. The thing that I would say, 'cause as you can imagine, we've done quite a lot of work with AI and legal data, and when you need to prepare a legal response, and especially things like references in legal information, that is where we've seen quite a lot of hallucinations, actually. So I think that be very wary, and it will not perform the role of a lawyer in that way, even though it will be able to provide you with something that looks very convincing. And unless you have legal expertise, you might not be able to spot that it wasn't a case in the UK in 2010 that you're referencing. It was actually a US case in 1998 that it's adapted. So I think that there's a word of caution in there, but I think that there are opportunities to use it to augment what you're doing. But I don't think that it will. Sadly, I think it's still going to have to work with a lawyer.
Any further questions at the front? Thank you. Yeah.
I think, Paul, Francesco will let you know, University of Warwick. You touched on confidentiality when you search for patents and novelty. And so often there are lots of AI tools, and often you can copy and paste an abstract, which is of something unpublished but contains the invention of someone. And then you search in publicly available tools as to whether there's prior art. Are you giving away your novelty?
By searching for prior art,
Yes.
no, I don't think you are, no.
So if you're sharing your invention with ChatGPT.
Oh, if you're sharing it with ChatGPT, I wouldn't do that. I thought you meant just
Right.
putting it into like a SPASnet.
No, I was saying, the Google patents of this world, and ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think, well, actually, ChatGPT has in the terms of conditions, don't put any confidential information in here, so I wouldn't do that.
Wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure of any cases where that's actually been tested, whether that constitutes a disclosure, but I would say don't do it. So.
Right. Any other tool that we need to be aware of, that not to use it?
Well, like I said, we don't really use any. I mean, for the purposes of presentations and things like that, then we could use that. I mean, and be quite comfortable with that. But any client work, we wouldn't go near any AI tools. Like I said, we would limit ourselves to ones that we could keep on our server, that are offline models, they're in the minority, and the ones we've tried for various things aren't very good. But our services that we offer as patented trademark attorneys.
We'll have to build you some better ones.
So yeah, it's in the terms and conditions of the ChatGPT that you shouldn't use any confidential information, but you still, Google uses your data as well. GPT uses your data, but as well, if you pay for it and then use Teams version, it is out of the training data. Would I trust it completely and share my confidential? But no, but I would pay for that just to take the confidential parts and then share some of the stuff that I can use GPT for.
Thank you, good question. Any other hands raised that we've missed here? Any more questions? We're doing well for time, I think. So, great. Front row, thank you.
Yeah, this is just a follow-on from Francesco's question, because you were mentioning that if you tell somebody not to use AI, they'll be like, great, I won't, and then they go and do it. So when we get it from the academic, they've probably already disclosed it to ChatGPT. And even if we don't, so does that, and because of this has only become a thing in recent years, are we maybe in for a reckoning with patent examinations that are going to be coming in the next years, where a lot of them get rejected because of disclosure to it, or is that not really going to be a problem?
I don't know how the patent examiner would find that what has been disclosed and what hasn't. So I think the risk of that's low. I just worry more about discovery during litigation. That's where that could be revealed, and that's where potentially there could be an issue. That's what I would worry about personally. In terms of like validity of pending applications, I wouldn't worry too much, because I don't think the patent examiner would find what's been disclosed to the ChatGPT, for example, and what hasn't.
And sorry, just to add on that point as well, I think that's why it's really important not to take away, I talked a little bit about in terms of the next steps, just going back and say no, and if anyone's done this, it's an absolute disaster and you're never going to be able to file a patent. Like, think about what you're going to do in your organisations to encourage people to use these tools safely, and also to be prepared to say, do you know what, I actually did use this in the free version of GPT. How should we mitigate that going forward? Because like I said, I am sure there are instances of that. I would agree. I think the likely impact of that moment is low, but I think you definitely should avoid it and think about how you are mitigating risk of that in the future.
Great. Can't see any hands raised. So I was going to ask, aside from critical things like the quality of your data that you might be feeding in, the need to train the user of an AI application, are there any other kind of challenges when you're trying to adopt AI into your processes?
So I think a couple mentioned in terms of integration is a key one. So if you want it to be part of a process, how do you make sure it works alongside the tools that you already have, so that it's seamless? I think that it's important to differentiate. We're talking about AI in two contexts here. We're talking about using AI that is accessible to us, but someone else has built and we're using their software. I think it's really interesting, actually, just a side note, when we talk about not trusting putting our data in that software, when how many people use software as a service for things like their HR data and don't give it a second thought. So we are putting our data in other people's software all of the time, okay? So that's not novel with AI. We're nervous about this technology, right? So that's why it seems like something we need to be more wary of. And that's because I don't think people are understanding it fully before using it. Okay, so that's the bit to address so that we integrate it well. And I think that integration point and sort of then thinking about the second area, which is building your own advanced analytics and AI, that's where there needs to be a lot more data work. So I think it's just important to think there are two applications there. And when you're thinking about going away and starting small, it might be easier if your data's in a mess to go and use models that have already been built, that are open source, that are readily available. You can also build your own models. It's obviously something that will take you a bit longer, but means that some of these risks that we've discussed will be removed. So those are the 2 points I'd make.
Thank you.
I don't really think there's any challenges for us, because like I said, we're not really using the tools, but I think there's a big challenge for us. One of our biggest challenges with AI is actually recruitment, training, and retention. So we showed the graph of the filing trends, which has just gone through the roof. I used to only do electronics and computational stuff. Now I work with life sciences on drug discovery. I never thought I'd be doing that. It's because of this. I work with so many more colleagues. It's a timely process to actually train somebody from the ground up to become a patent attorney. It takes years rather than months. So to get somebody in who's got the AI expertise and then train them is a long process. The people aren't out there to recruit them laterally from other firms. This has come out of nowhere effectively. And training people up to do that is challenging again because, well, patent attorneys, we like language and things. So to find one who also likes doing all the maths as well, to understand like bias and various statistical terms, understanding how a neural network's trained, that's difficult again. So yeah, that's really, I think, the main challenge that we have.
I think I'm gonna focus on one aspect of it that is a bit higher level, and that's the nuance that I don't know if you lose it or you gain more of it still. Depending on how you use AI models, you might lose nuance, and then if you dig in more and then ask for more nuance, you will get it. But just looking at the LinkedIn and all the posts, the words like fostering and in the realms of all coming out of nowhere when GPT just gets them out, and then you would think that you would lose the ability to use new words, and then if you don't use new words, you would limit yourself to thinking. I suppose that's a bit too philosophical, but that's the challenge. That's one of the main challenges I think about quite a lot.
The most common mistake you've seen organizations adopting AI?
I'll just say, let's not use it. And not having a proper AI adoption strategy and not taking care of the risk and everything else that we talked about.
Okay.
I think a very similar thing, just bury your head in the sand. It's not, if that wouldn't work long term if there are things that would replace tasks that you do. I think it's important to look at these things. We do that. We share information with other firms, even our competitors as a profession. So yeah.
Yeah, we're all in alignment on that, I think. Being afraid of it, so burying your head in the sand, but I think it's more than that. It is thinking, oh God, something terrible will happen if I use this technology. Being prepared to engage with the technology and learn a bit about it, I think will, for those of you who I said maybe feeling uncomfortable about adopting it, I think it will make you feel a lot more comfortable when it doesn't feel like such a black box. So yeah, I would really encourage people to just learn to squash that fear of adoption.
Great. Last opportunity for questions. We've got a couple of minutes left. Great. Second from the front. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Core from the Royal Holloway. Very specific questions. Thank you for all the talks. That was really, really interesting. I did take notice you had something on using AI to create a flyer. What software are you using for that?
Canva.
Okay. I'll look it up on the train.
I'll put you in touch with our marketing person because they would know more about the specific tools.
Wonderful. Okay. Rich discussions, great questions. Thank you so much. If you got some of the questions wrong that Paul posed, don't feel too bad. You know, you don't normally have to make a decision that quickly, right? It's but anyway. Well, thank you so much, Sahand, Paul, Sian. Really, really valuable. It's not every day we get such experts in the room at the same time. It's one of the great things you get at Praxis. Round of applause, please. Thank you.